Madam President, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, good afternoon, everybody. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the President of Liberia, as our guest speaker in the African Leaders series here at IPI in the Trigg Center. We are truly honored to have you with us this afternoon, in spite of your very busy schedule. I would also use the opportunity, and I think I have everybody with me, to congratulate you on your re-election as Liberia's president in October last year, as well as you winning, as we all know, the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize. Our discussion today is a continuation of our African Leader series. The series has previously featured other prominent leaders, including President Wad, Kagame, Bongo, and Katara, to meet with members of the UN community in this informal setting. The International Peace Institute's Africa program seeks to assist African leaders and African institutions to strengthen their capacity to prevent and to respond to crises. And it is in this spirit I welcome you here today. After 8 years of tension and instability, Liberia plunged into a devastating civil war that killed nearly 150,000 people between 1989 and 2003. Since the end of the war, and with the support of the international community, Liberia has begun a long transition from a war-torn country to a stable and democratic nation. Over the past 6 years, under the acclaimed leadership of President Johnson Sirleaf, Liberia has consolidated its hard-won peace. Progress has been made in beginning to rebuild the institutions and the security sector, to restore the economy by attracting foreign investment, to address the plight of thousands of youth and children affected by the conflict, and to consolidate the country's democratic process. However, major challenges remain in several areas, including governance and the fight against corruption, enlarging the political space and enhancing inclusiveness, strengthening the security sector and the judiciary, overcoming Liberia's infrastructural and capacity deficits, as well as furthering national reconciliation. The topic of today's event, namely consolidating a future in peace, highlights the new phase which opened with President Johnson Sirleaf's re-election, as I said, in October 2011. Bringing together all actors of the society, especially the Liberian women who played a critical role in ending the violent conflict in 2003, President Johnson Sirleaf is committed to transforming Liberia. Consolidating a peaceful and inclusive Liberia is of great importance, not only for your country, but for the entire West African sub-region and the continent as a whole. President Johnson Sirleaf brings to this challenge not only her political and moral commitment to furthering Liberia's transformation, but also a distinguished and national and international career which makes her eminently qualified to meet it. President Johnson Sirleaf is the 24th president of Liberia and the first elected female head of state in Africa. She obtained a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and before winning the presidency for the first time in 2005, she held positions in government, in the banking and private sectors, and with the United Nations. In May this year, President Johnson Sirleaf was appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as one of the 3 co-chairs of a high panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda. She is the current chairperson of the Mano River Union, where she leads regional efforts for political stability and economic cooperation among Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and Côte d'Ivoire. She also chairs the African Leaders Malaria Alliance and is serving a second 2-year term as Goodwill Ambassador for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene in Africa. I don't understand how to get the time to do all these things. President Johnson Sirleaf, we really salute you and your fight to bring peace, justice, and equality to all Liberians. We also recognize your efforts to promote non-violence and the participation of women in peace-building work across Africa. President Johnson Sirleaf's presentation will address these challenges, followed by a conversation with you. President Johnson Sirleaf, the floor is yours.
President Rod-Larsen, members of the Institute, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome the opportunity to visit IPI once again at your kind invitation. And I will talk about consolidating the peace, but with a different dimension. I'd like to talk about the role of women in peacemaking and peacekeeping, and the invaluable contributions they have made as meaningful actors in the peace processes in our region. Some 10 years ago, the former Defense Minister of Finland, Elisabeth Rehn, and I were commissioned by UNIFEM to document the effects of conflicts on women and the role of women in peacekeeping. We traveled to Bosnia and Colombia and Cambodia, Liberia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Democratic Republic of Congo, East Timor. Despite the diversity in tradition, culture, and level of development, the voices of the women captured in our published documentary, Women, War, Peace, were the same. Sexual exploitation, public service discrimination, peace crusaders, political exclusion when the war comes to an end. The Liberian experience is no different, although significant changes regarding the role of women are underway in all countries across the globe. When the Civil War erupted in Liberia in 1990, Liberian women initially concerned themselves with relief efforts, identifying with displaced people in centers across the country. By 1994, when all semblance of civility disappeared, killings intensified, and women became the victims. A group of women organized themselves into a pressure group called the Liberian Women Initiative, concluding that they needed to do more than simply provide relief. They needed to use whatever strength they had to help to restore the peace in our country. The initiative brought together women of all faiths through the Interfaith Mediation Council and women of different ethnic and interest groups. In February 1994, the Liberian Women Initiative called a mass meeting of women, the only criterion for joining being a commitment to peace and the unity of our country. Women turned out in the thousands. Thereafter, they staged peaceful demonstration admonishing the warlords that they wanted peace, not war. That if anybody wanted to rule a country, they should go to the ballot box and not resort to the gun. Promises of peace made to them were quickly broken, and the fighting raged on. The Women Advocacy Group advanced their initiatives, their networks transcending national borders, reaching out to Liberians in the diaspora to keep the issues of peace in Liberia on the agenda of the US, Europe, African countries. Unsolicited but undeterred, the women continued their crusade to the various Liberian peace conferences, ending in Accra in 2003, where they were invited to participate as observers. As a result of their determination, ultimately every decision made by the warlords was referred to the women for their views. Many of you may have seen the documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, which chronicles the interfaith female-led Joining for Peace in Liberia, and which earned our compatriot Lima Bowie the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize. In the 1997 election, in which I was a candidate, women mobilized and spread out to every county to undertake civic education and inform people of their rights. They returned with reports that there was no level playing field, and they predicted correctly that the people would vote for my opponent out of fear. Nevertheless, their advocacy continued unabated, and after Accra, through the transitional government, resulting in my elections in 2005. Liberia today is enjoying its 9th year of uninterrupted peace, has now turned its attention through the women from peacemaking to peace building by strengthening mechanisms to ensure that peace continues to prevail, not only in Liberia, but in our neighborhood, the Mono River Union Basin, in our region, the 16 ECOWAS countries, and in our continent, all countries of the African Union. The role of Liberian women has similarly evolved from peacemaking into peace building. This peace-building role was facilitated by institutional frameworks such as the Mono River Women Peace Network, comprising peace activists from Sierra Leone, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, and Liberia. The West African Network for Peace Building, which has established strong national networks in every ECOWAS member state. Its Liberian partner is the Women in Peace Building Network and the Angie Brooks International Center for Women's Empowerment, Leadership Development, International Peace and Security. MAWOPNET was established through the instrumentality of a Geneva-based women advocacy group, Femme Africa Solidarity, which brought together women from Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea at a meeting in Abuja in 2000. Once unified, the women were instrumental in opening up dialogue among the leaders of their respective countries. In 2003, MAWOPNET was awarded the United Nations Prize for Human Rights by the General Assembly in recognition of his outstanding achievement in promoting human rights and peace. Today, MAWOPNET Liberia's chapter is reaching out to the women of La Cote d'Ivoire in efforts to mediate the conflict there. They are also engaged in a humanitarian situation of the Ivorian refugees by providing food and shelter. WADEP and WIPNET promote gender mainstreaming in peace building and conflict prevention framework at the community, national, and regional level. Between 2001 and 2003, they organized collaborative peace-building training networks for peace-building women from 9 of Liberia's 15 counties. Another initiative involving Liberian women is the Women Peace and Security Network Africa, based in Ghana and headed by Liberian laureate Liman Bowie. Considering the vital role which women have and continue to play, our government supports several mechanisms and initiatives to empower them and enhance their peacekeeping and peace-building effort. Among them is the Angie Brooks International Center for Women's Empowerment, Leadership Development, International Peace and Security, an outcome of the 2009 International Women's Colloquium, which brought together over 800 international and more than 2,000 domestic women to advocate for a greater role in women. The success of the initiative of another advocacy group, Gender is My Agenda campaign, a recent one, but one that has won the approval of the African Union at the summit in January. It seeks to adopt the Women's Situation Room as a best practice, and the Angie Brooks Center continues to champion this initiative in all elections in Africa. The summit also endorsed the empowerment of women in agriculture, an advocacy group for support for women farmers. I serve as a champion for both of these initiatives. Liberia is engaged with the UN Peacebuilding Commission. We strongly support all of those efforts made on behalf of the women. We strongly support the Situation Room, which monitored the Liberian elections of 2011, which monitored the Senegal elections of 2011, and also is now in the process of monitoring the elections in Sierra Leone. Women continue to play a major role in the efforts for peace. Women continue to be those peace builders, continue to promote the environment that enable all citizens to search for peace, to maintain peace, and to use the security that peace brings to be able to join in the processes of development that would touch the lives and change the condition of humankind. Thank you.
And thank you, Madam President, for a candid and very comprehensive expose of the topic of women in peace building. I think I speak for all when I say that we all feel enlightened each time we listen to you, also now, but also that we feel the values and the passion that is driving you and your country forward under your leadership. I actually have several questions to you myself, but I feel bad about starting asking you those questions because I feel I would then be robbing our other guests for the opportunity to engage directly with you. So I think I will simply just open the floor. Nobody dares to be the first? I see two courageous hands there. Shall we start with the lady on the left there in the white jacket? Can you please state your name and your affiliation before you speak?
Thank you. Corina Villacorta with World Vision International. Thank you, Mrs. President. I have two questions for you. One is, how young were women engaging in this movement in your experience in Liberia, meaning were children, girl children engaged? And my second question is, where would you place the issue of peace and security in the post-2015 discussion? Thank you.
I think, shall I take a couple of questions and then we move on, or would you like to address this immediately?
You can take a couple. I just want to make sure I get them properly, that's all.
Okay, should we take at least one more then? There's a gentleman there at the very back of the room.
Hi, I'm Jeff Laurenti with the Century Foundation. Madam President, in your last couple moments, you mentioned the UN Peacebuilding Commission. And for those of us who are kind of prisoners of the UN ghetto and its institutional arrangements, I think it would be helpful if you could share with us your impression as the leader of one of the countries that are part of its agenda, your experience with the Peacebuilding Commission. You know, the thought 7 years ago when it was created at a summit of world leaders right at the start of the General Assembly had been that you needed at the global level an organization or a political body that would sustain global interests in countries emerging from conflict after the peacekeepers have gone home. But you do have an SRSG on the ground in Liberia. What do you see as the value added from the Peacebuilding Commission's work, from the chairman of its configuration previously, Ambassador Zaid Rad Al-Hussein, and now Sweden's Ambassador Staffan Tellender? What do they bring that's special, that's different? How does this make a difference in Liberia's quest to stabilize itself on the path of reconstruction?
I think that was such a comprehensive question that I think I will move directly to you, Madam President.
The first two questions.
Could you, for the benefit of the President, could you repeat briefly the two questions you had?
Thank you. The first question is whether young girls were involved in the movement of women fighting for peace. And my second question is, where would you place peace and security in the post-2015 agenda? Thank you.
Young girls, most times, are with their mothers. Most times, the mothers who sat in the rain and the sun had babies with them. Young girls also bore the consequences of the war, many times having to run with their mothers. So they became, if not involved as active participants in the promotion of peace, certainly they became affected by those processes of war that took away the peace. The peace and security, you know, in post-conflict, you can't do anything about development unless you have the stability that enables you to move around. So peace and security focuses number one in all of our development agenda, whether we're dealing with the poverty reduction strategy or our new long-term vision going forward. It's centered around peace and security. It has to be at the whole basis. And this is why we're talking today about the G7 Plus and the New Deal. And that one does recognize that stability and peace and security is fundamental to any effort. On the UN Peacebuilding Commission, they've been very instrumental working with us on addressing land conflicts and have provided support in that effort. We're also going through the formulation and monitoring of a transition program for the drawdown of the peacekeeping force. And they too have been very helpful. But I think the one thing that stands out in the Peacebuilding Commission for Liberia is this innovative idea about decentralizing and consolidating security forces. So we've now come up with what's called the hub, security hub. There's going to be 4 of them in the different regions in the country, 5 of them. And in those hubs, one brings together all the elements of security, whether you're dealing with the police or the immigration or the courts. They all come together strategically placed so that there's easy reach to where problems may be in that particular region, instead of moving everyone from the capital, particularly in those cases where our capacity is limited, our mobility also constrained. The placement of these hubs in the regions where justice in all its aspects, security in all its dimensions, can come together in a consolidated way to work together to address issues relating to conflict, if that occurs, or to promote peace, is an innovative and I believe is a first of its kind in peacekeeping efforts around the globe. So that's going to be a great model, and if it works in Liberia, there will be the potential for replication in other countries similarly situated.
Thank you very much so far. Any other questions at this stage? The young gentleman there with the glasses.
I can pretend to be young. Yusuf Mahmoud.
And remember to state your name and affiliation.
Yusuf Mahmoud, Senior Advisor, IPI. Madam President, you have been an icon for many women in Africa, being the first female president. There are many of them aspiring to the highest office. What would you say they should do to prepare themselves for that opportunity?
I think this is also a question of such a nature that I will give the floor directly to you. I think this needs a little bit of elaboration.
I just left a meeting where the Secretary General launched his initiative, Education First. I think that's where you start. And for us, in many of our countries around, education of the girl child is where we begin to place the emphasis because they've been neglected over the years, because their entire potential is based upon education, and education in those early years. Anyone who wants to aspire to being a leader needs first to ensure that they get a good education as much as possible. Of course, as one progresses in your education and begin to focus as a professional, one will have to determine just what you want to be and be prepared to stay the course. Be prepared to grow in your profession, keeping your eyes on the objective, keeping on target of where you want to be. Things do evolve, and there are times when you don't actually sit and have a roadmap to be a leader or a roadmap to become a president, but you do have a roadmap to succeed, and you put all your effort in it and you remain consistent in the things you believe in, and chances are you begin to climb one rung of the ladder after another, and each success gives you more motivation for another round of success. And so there's so many women leaders around that we are just a role model. Let me tell you, let me give you a story. I thought one of my best stories came from the experience of a UNESCO country director who went to one of our rural areas and met a little boy and a little girl fighting. And so the principal came out and admonished the little girl and said, you know, little girls don't fight. And so she was a bit taken aback. And then she approached him and said, Principal, don't forget, a woman is president. I thought that was a good story until about a month ago I heard another story in which a class of primary students and a little boy of 6, they were going around asking them, what do you want to be? And this little boy said, I want to be vice president. And so the teacher said, Vice President, why don't you aspire to the highest of president? He said, you want my friends to laugh at me? President does women's work. Please go ahead.
This is starting to get very entertaining. Do I see another hand? Yes, I do. Please. Again, remember your name.
My name is Miriam Lang. I work in the Rule of Law Unit at the UN Secretariat.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, Miriam Lang, Rule of Law Unit in the UN Secretariat. I had a question following up on the earlier question on sort of how to inspire women leaders in Africa. do you feel like what have been the measures that your government has taken to sort of get women into leading positions? I mean, what's the situation? I mean, I understand that they've been very prominent in civil society to end the war. Has that translated into many women in government position, in parliamentary positions, in the civil service, justice sector, etc.? And what are you doing about it to sort of improve that?
Again, I think we have a very broad and conceptual question which requires a direct answer. I will come back to you in a minute.
Lots of efforts to sensitize women, to ensure that girls are retained in school, to promote women leadership in workshops, to get more women out there. The drive for increasing women's role in decision-making and in leadership is a continuing process. We've even had some setbacks in Liberia in that the number of women in legislature, in parliament, was reduced slightly in the 2011 elections as compared to 25, which tells us that our task still remains great, that we have not yet been able to achieve it. We don't have the sufficient number of women, the critical mass of women that we can now use to put. We try to place women in strategic places so that they become role models and example for others, and we have quite a bit. And Liberia has a history of women leadership, maybe because our population is small, and we've learned a certain amount of respect and equality and among it. So it's not very strange to have a woman going way back into our history from our chiefs that took really strong positions, to even Angie Brooks, who was the first African woman to head the General Assembly, to President of the General Assembly. So those role models have always been there, and so many other women have accomplished so much. Right now it's an issue of how do we get them into political leadership role, and they face the same constraints women face everywhere. The lack of resources, the fact that as mothers, they have certain parental responsibilities that may constrain their mobility and flexibility. Sometimes there are laws, not so much in Liberia, laws that discriminate against women. Sometimes it's just social practices that constrain them. But we've come a long way, and I think the examples there, and around the world, I think if you look, you'll see what represents a major change in women's taking leadership role throughout society, whether you're dealing with political leadership or professional leadership. It's happening, and it's happening very fast.
Thank you again. So the lady there on the right, right there.
Thank you. My name is Marit Kahonen-Sharif from the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I had the pleasure to work with Her Excellency at her time on UNIFEM. Just wanted to ask you, you spoke about women's voices for peace and how later on they recognize also the connection between economic development and peace and stability. Where are the Liberian women's voices on justice? What are they saying? What are they saying about the need for conflict-related justice? What are they saying about transitional justice processes? Are they heard? Where is Liberia going? Thank you very much.
The Liberian women continue to talk about justice. Sometimes I think one needs a stronger effort there, admittedly. But you do have a strong women's group, whether it's the Women's Initiative, whether it's MAWOPNET and all. We have a very strong female women's lawyer association. We've been taking some laws. You know, we have a very, very tough RIP law that makes it non-bailable. We have a special court to handle a case of women violence. We have special units in the Ministry of Justice. So the women's voice for justice are told through those institutional arrangements. Individual voices continue to speak up, and those organizations speak up. We still need to do more because we still have some traditional practices that need to be addressed and need to be addressed more forcibly and more consistently. An agenda for that is being looked at.
I will then move. There's a gentleman there on the left-hand side, and then we have plenty of time, so I think everybody can ask their questions and come up with their comments. The gentleman there.
Thank you, Madam President. Hans Sivertsen from the Norwegian Parliament. My question goes on what you referred to, women in different parts of society. How do you feel about gender quotas in different parts of the society, from politics and higher education and whatever?
Gender?
Quotas.
Oh, gender quota.
Shall we go? Shall we take one other question then? The lady right there.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I wanted to ask a question related to the professions. As a United Methodist, you know that we've been working with the UN Global Fund, and one of the things that the UN representatives have reported is that it's hard to get women doctors in positions where they can make a contribution to the work in their country. That is policy setting, and that it's hard to have their contributions recognized and given due weight as policies are made that are trying to eradicate some of the killer diseases. And I wondered what could be done in addition to quotas, that might amplify the voice and the wisdom of women in settings like the country-level Global Fund.
I think I'll ask you to address those two questions because there's an interlinkage there. Before we move on to other hats.
I'm all for quotas. It's an affirmative action program that addresses the historical neglect that have prevailed throughout the world as regards women. However, quota must ensure that there is some form of competition. Quota must ensure that it's not just an entitlement, but it's earned. And I believe we have many examples in which quota have just moved the bar one step further to enable women to be able to participate at a much higher level. There are all kinds of arguments against it. It takes away from competition. It does not enable a woman to measure up. It will be given to women of lower capacity. But I say it's still an affirmative action program that has worked in many countries. And to the extent we can get that in many countries is good. Many of us are still trying to get to 30% women participation, which all our countries have subscribed to in UN resolution. I think there's a big push to ensure that all countries should, at the minimum, be able to get that. How they then design the mechanisms for getting that 30% participation in all levels of society would differ from country to country depending upon their circumstances. Did you say women doctors are having difficulties? There's not many of them. I'd like to know more about that. I mean, every doctor we have in Liberia is in such high position of need that if anybody would deny them the right to participate in policy formulation, I would have to look into that. Please tell me more. I want to look into it.
New hands? I see one over there.
Thank you so much for being here today, and I feel honored and privileged to hear you twice today, so thank you. My name is Salwa Cater, and I am with the U.S. Federation for Middle East Peace. I have a couple of questions. I know you are an icon for all of us. In 2001, I had invited another wonderful African lady who since passed to this same building, actually, Professor Wangari. And she taught us also, and I know I learned so much from her about pursuing an idea that you have so dearly to you. And this is why I'm where I am now. I want to ask you the question about religion. Did that ever come into play when you were pursuing, is the tradition, religion, and if it did, how did you handle it? Because a lot of this issue is very prevalent in the Middle East. How would you handle it? What would you advise for people to do, women that is? Thank you.
In Liberia, religious tension has traditionally been very minimal. There have been coexistence between the two major religions in our society, Christianity and Islam. Recently, some tensions have developed, not reached uncontrollable proportions. There will always be people of different faiths in our country and countries across the world. I think it's respect for each other's religion, it's the tolerance, it's laws that ensure that all religions, all people of different faiths enjoy the same rights, the same privileges, and that a government in its policies and practices ensure that those rights of equality are preserved. Today, we all experience what's happening as a result of religious intolerance. And I think we all must speak out against that to ensure that there is coexistence in our society, whether we're dealing with different ethnic groups or different religious groups. All societies must ensure that there's no discrimination and there's equal access to justice, to opportunity, to equity for all, regardless of those differences.
You want to take the floor? Yeah, I wanted to follow up that question because I think... Could you rise, and you need a microphone.
I'm President Sirleaf's ambassador here, so I was just...
Thank you.
I just wanted to amplify the question of the last speaker, and I think what she wanted really was you to address the issue where religion constrains the woman because of the definition of her role. And what do you do when you are constrained by religion, even in terms of the education you get and constrained to pursue what you want to pursue? How would you handle it? I think that was the question really she was trying to get you to respond to. Thank you.
Well, you know, I think you may have reference to the fact that that Muslim women perhaps feel a little bit constrained because of their own religious dictates. One would have to continue to work with them. One would have to continue to embolden them, but they too will be subjected to their own cultural mindset, what they come out of their educational processes. I don't think it's something that one can legalize and wish it away. I think it requires the evolution in society where higher and higher levels of education and openness in society begins to break down some of those long-standing barriers that are based on religious belief. As you look across the Muslim world today, you can already see changes taking place in all of those strongly traditional societies. Women are taking positions Women are more open. Women are challenging those things. And so I think that movement toward addressing it is on the way. It will probably take some time in some of the most traditional societies. But the opening that's happening is eventually going to erode that. That's my belief.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Kate Hunt from CARE International. Speaking, if I could, to your last point about the traditional societies that are going through transitions from conflict, and might look to your country and the examples that you offer and see this tradition you've mentioned of strong women who have actually in history occupied positions, had education, and were there to step up in the transition period. And other countries have sometimes traditional practices that don't allow for that as readily, and the women also maybe haven't had the access to education. From your point of view, as this year we're dealing with a variety of issues on women, particularly the Commission on the Status of Women looking at violence against women next March. What would be, if in a perfect world, how would you accelerate the changes that could be taking place and should be taking place in countries, just those going through the tradition from war to peace, to get many of those standards met for women that you've been succeeding on step by step?
I think there's a lot more networking that can be done. Quite a bit is taking place right now. Women are reaching across one country, across borders, across, to be able to share their experiences. Women in traditional societies are now getting opportunities provided to them, either locally or externally, to go out and to see the experiences of other countries. The communication revolution itself is changing people's own habits and their societies, and there's no stopping that right now. And so anything that one can do to foster that process of information exchange, information access, networking across toward a common objective, are the things that I think will continue to enhance the role of women, particularly in those societies where they face some of these traditional barriers.
Shall we first go to the gentleman there?
Thank you so much. My name is Staffan Tillander. I'm with the Swedish Mission here and chair of the Liberia Peacebuilding Configuration. Thank you so much for the statement, Madam President. I think it was very inspiring, not only to women but also to men, because I think we often face a situation when we talk about gender issues and we all talk about the commitments we're prepared to make, but in a verbal manner, we often have trouble going from the verbal commitment to actual implementation. I think Liberia is an example of where this has actually happened in real life, and I think we can learn a lot from this. I had a different question, though, and that is about your experiences from the UN system. You worked in the World Bank and the UN system at headquarters levels, and now you've seen the UN system at the actual implementation level in your own country. And it would be interesting to hear your reflections about how you would see the UN system and the multilateral system being reformed and strengthened, how this should be done in order to best serve the countries where at the country level, at the implementation, where it really matters much of what the UN is doing. Thank you.
I think whether you're dealing with the World Bank or the UN system or USAID or Danish aid, the message is the same. Build your programs around priorities established by the people themselves. Ensure that the beneficiaries of that support and assistance identify where their need is best and putting them in charge, even if that means something that's well known to UNDP, capacity building, because if you don't, the program, the intervention, the projects are not owned by the people, and you don't get the consensus and the participation and the ownership that makes it the most successful. So what can you do better? I think it's changing. If you listen to what all the development partners are saying today, is exactly what I'm saying, that aid has not been as effective as it should have been because we've not grounded it, in what the people want. Because we all think, and governments are just as guilty also. Because governments sometimes think, oh, I know, where I want that school, and I think we should have this road in this particular place. From the center, you can have the nicely development plan, sitting on a desktop and doing all of that. And maybe sometimes what the people want in their community is something as simple as clean water. Just a well that enables them, to give their children clean water as a part to a school that's not properly equipped. It is changing. And I think you find a convergence of views now among development partners about ensuring that the beneficiaries of support and assistance are really the one that lead the effort.
Then we are, not rapidly, but we are getting closer to closings. We cannot take all the questions, so we will take maybe 3. Okay, so should we start right over there?
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam President, ECOWAS has taken the lead in addressing the crisis in Mali, and the Secretary General has presented his integrated strategy for the Sahel this morning. In your opinion, what could be done to increase the participation, the involvement of women from the region, from Mali and from the Sahel region, in all these efforts to address or to find a concerted response to the crisis in Mali and the Sahel? Thank you.
Again, a very big question, but I think we should, in order to save time, let's take 2 more. There is a lady at the very back there, and then there's a gentleman.
Thank you very much. I, first of all, my name is Binta Diop, the founder of Farm Africa Solidarity.
I didn't see you.
I just wanted to congratulate IPI first, because I think this issue that we are talking about today, women, peace, and security, is so crucial. But we know that many times we take it as soft issues. And as Madam President have demonstrated, is the development issues. And we need to take this as a priority. Madam, you are our role model, not just in Africa, but we see it in the global world. Today, you have been recognizing the work done by Liberian women to transform their society, but also what the African women have been doing to come in solidarity to their sisters. We are trying to make it, we are trying to do it. And I think we are having social impact and changes in our community. My question to you, Madam, I know Liberia for quite some time, and I know that it was a country devastated, being first of all, the paradise of Africa, ended up by being really the hell of Africa. And I think that you take courage. I don't know what motivates you, but I really want, because somebody raised the issue, what will you tell to the young generation? But what motivates you to say, this country that is really devastated, I wanted to make sure that something happened. As a woman, we say always that we are the one to pick up the pieces when everything is gone. But what can you share with us? That motivation that I have been with you for many, many years, but see that every time you wake up, You say, I wanted to reconstruct and reconcile my people. So share a little bit your experience on that.
I think the questions are getting broader and broader here. I think we'll take one last question before you respond. Okay, it's the gentleman at the very back.
Good evening, Madam President. It's an honor to be having the privilege to give the last question. Recently, when you addressed the market women, the women, and talk about the market women in Harlem, and stated that the role women play in your election in 2005, back home, people misconstrue your statement, and the opposition party took it as a play field to say that they were cheated, fraud in the election. So in the public forum, could you restate or clarify what you meant by voter registration, the role that women play in taking it from the children on the days of the election? And also, on that note, what would be your legacy? What would you like to see the role of women in Liberia and Africa when you leave, when you're 12 years in Liberia? What would you like to see? What would women be doing in Liberia or in Africa, if you can predict?
I should have qualified when I said that this was the last question. It was the last question from the audience, but I also have some questions. But I would like you to respond first to this, and then I have a couple of quick questions.
The first one, how can women get more involved in the Mali crisis? I'm glad that Benetta Tiev is here. When I talked about FEM, Africa Solidarity, she's the leader of that institution. And we talk about gender is my agenda. She's also instrumental in that as well as and she has been working with women groups, going way back, whether you're dealing with the Congo crisis or the Rwanda crisis. So she's been a champion in all of that for many, many years. So I would have to pass that to her and ask you to talk to her and see how she can get some of her institutions working with some of the women who'd like to be helpful in the Mali crisis. What motivates me? I think it's a lifetime of being a part of all worlds in Liberia. You know, whether you're dealing with the haves or the have-nots, I've gone between both. Whether you're dealing with rural life and urban life, I've shared in both because of my parental situation. The difficulties, and I think the central theme of all of that is the potential for Liberia to be a successful country has always been there. And if we were able to just harness our effort, collaborate, unify, that potential in a small population country, richly endowed, that it can succeed. And I think that's been the motivation. And even though there have been major setbacks like the conflicts that we had, that potential has not diminished. And I think for many of us who have come past that, still think that we owe it to the country, we owe it to missed opportunities of the past to try to re-seize the initiative to recapture that potential and to finally put it on the right path. So we've made some good beginnings. There's no guarantee that there won't be hiccups and regression, but at least I think it's on the right path, and it behooves all of us to continue to do so. When it comes to you, to that, I don't care whether it's in this country or whether it's in my country or something, you say something and journalists take it and they find out one sensational thing and blow it out of proportion. So that particular one talking with a group of women in Harlem and say, we're talking 2005 election, not even 2011, 2005 election, to say, those were the difficult elections and some women did things like a mother took her son's card. The percentage of that where it happened is so minimal that it has absolutely no effect on election results. So, but
I think
my legacy.
As it relates to Liberia as a country, the role of women will play after you leave office and the role of women in Africa.
I told you what the little boy said.
that's good enough. I think we have all been very privileged here this afternoon to meet a human being, to meet a woman, to meet a politician who, and I've been listening very carefully to the dialogue here, who's actually in these on these three dimensions also crisscrossing three fields: your own country, the region, and actually you have formal roles in all this, but also the globe. So because in your new position, together with the British Prime Minister and the Indonesian President, you are going to chair and be responsible for looking at the post-2015 MDGs. And you're going to look at the really hard global issues like extreme poverty, social inclusion, environmental sustainability, but also good governance and women and the poor. I mean, this is a range of the most challenging issues on the globe. So I'd like at the very end here to hear a few thoughts on how are you going to pursue that challenge in your we don't need half an hour, but if you can give us some headlines. And then also I can't resist asking you about, Liberia is now consolidating a hard-won peace, but in your environment on your continent, there's everything from the Sahel to issues in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea-Bissau, in Mali, etc. If you could share your thoughts a little bit on these issues, and then at last back to Liberia again. The UN is planning to wind down its military presence in your country. What are the implications, and what are your thoughts about how to handle the situation when eventually a withdrawal of the UN force takes place? So 3 questions: one local, one regional, one global, to a human being, a woman, and a politician.
Let's go through them again. All right. First, as regards the role we'll play in the post-2015, where those of us on the high-level panel are committed to making sure whatever comes out as the successor regime to the MDGs will truly reflect what people want. And so that means that while we may have some ideas about sustainable development, environmental concerns, women empowerment, fighting poverty, and all those important objectives, that we must make sure that we take it from the voices of the people and the wishes of the people through robust consultation. And also one must see what have been the successes and the constraints for the achievement of the MDGs and how those can be incorporated in what the new development agenda will be. It's going to be a very robust process. It's not going to be easy to get the kinds of consensus around development goals that everybody can feel that they own because they've had a voice in a process that led to its formulation. But that's what we're trying to achieve, and And we hope that all of you, wherever you are, that will be a part of that process, will also share in that. Our region, we consider the situation in Mali as a major setback when there was an attempted and almost successful coup d'etat. And ECOWAS took a very strong position on that and was able to arrest it from going any further and try to reverse it. But that process is not concluded because until you can, although there's a transitional government in place now, until you can get past that transitional period and go back to elections where the people select their leaders, and it's been complicated by the situation in the north. That one is even more serious because the threat to Mali's territorial integrity and the chances of military intervention are still there if it cannot be resolved peacefully. The dangers to that breakaway going across borders based on common faith, trying to form a religious political union could also pose risk to countries that are Mali's neighbors, and so that's where intervention may be necessary. I think the Guinea-Bissau situation was partly addressed, but it remains a troubled place where forces of non-state actors still have a major role to play that could threaten the security of the state. I think the African Union, ECOWAS, as well as the UN are very mindful of that. In our own region, there's still some tender spots. The borders between Liberia and Cote d'Ivoire are volatile, and the forces moving across that threaten the peace to Cote d'Ivoire as well as to Liberia are still something even on the Ghana side. There's also that because of the changed political situation in Cote d'Ivoire that has created some dislocations and some disunities and created some movements of rebellion that we all have to work to contain. Was that all?
I also asked a bit about the global issues, your new challenges with the British Prime Minister and the Indonesian President when you are going to chair the post-millennium development goals agenda. Just a few words on how you think, what are the main challenges and how will you go about it? This is an even more challenging task than being president of Liberia, I would say.
The main challenges could be a diversion in views as to the proper responses to circumstances. I mean, the African view and what that development agenda should be could differ quite a bit from the European view, which may be represented by Prime Minister Cameron. The Indonesia view, that's why I started by saying I don't think any of us involved in this global endeavor should have preconceived notion of what the agenda should be. What we have pledged ourselves to do is to arrange consultations, global consultations, to involve civil society who are closer to the people, so to speak, to listen to their voices, until we can find those threads of consensus. Whether we're dealing with environmental issues or women empowerment, youth empowerment, very important. Now, that's one we find commonality across wherever we go. Youth unemployment, youth impatience, youth anger is almost in all of our countries, developed or developing. It's those kinds of common issues that we hope we can be able to identify and to put those at the center of the new agenda. But we must all just, I think, let ourselves take a back seat on this and really listen to how the people identify what their needs are going forward. Shall I say more?
No, I think this gave us a wonderful overview of how you're going to work and your perspective on it. And really...
Peg Snyder, you wanted to say something? Okay.
I think we have to close, actually, because there are lots of people here who have lots of other things on their agenda. So I would just say to you that thank you for having shared so much with us this afternoon. For having shared with us your analytical depth, your incredibly practical perspective springing out of that depth. You're a doer. And thank you for having shared with us the values and the principles which you so passionately are standing for. I think that every single individual in this room admires you, admires your leadership, admire you as a human being, as a woman, as a politician. And I think everybody here have been proud to be in this room this afternoon together with you. And I think I have also everybody with me when I say, carry on and good luck to you.